part-time. And the part-time gives somebody more flexibility too, which I think is helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Tim, do we have lunch hours off? Are we closed during lunch hour times?
We are not closed during lunch hour times. They do have to close the office quite often though when they're out in the field currently. With a clerical person, they would not have to do that, most likely.
So there would be someone to answer the full 8-hour day that people would call in?
I mean, they wouldn't be there the whole day, but most of the time, the shift that we usually do is like 9 to 2 for the part-time person, and that works out pretty well, because then lunches are covered pretty well.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
So it kind of works out pretty well.
Vivian?
Well, when I read your request on the rationale, it almost sounds like to assist with field work, that's the first thing, if needed, or staff the office when appraisers are doing field work. So it sounds like she still might not be in the office, or that person may not be in the office if they have to assist with field work.
That would be only once in a great while. You want me talking basically when somebody's not there, essentially, which is very rare. I mean, you're talking maybe 2 weeks out of the whole year, potentially.
Any other questions for Tim? Michael, what is our contingency amount that we have to work with this year? Yeah.
Oh, Heather, I do have another question.
Okay.
21, it's $141,700. Page 21, about 2, 4, 6, 8 lines down.
Okay, Dan?
After halftime, don't benefits start? And would there be a discount on benefits or something because of or would there be full-time benefits with that, or?
The only spot that there aren't benefits is 19 hours or less.
What?
19 hours or less per week. After that, it's not as simple as it used to be. That we used to just say at halftime you prorated. You now have, with the change in the healthcare law, there's a certain threshold, and that might be 29 hours.
I thought that was 46 hours, that you had to have less than half time.
It's 30 for health insurance.
Pardon?
It's 30 for health insurance, so if they're working over that, then we have to pay full health insurance. The payment in lieu of health insurance can be prorated at the percentage that the employee works. And then the other issue would be retirement. If the person is working 10 8-hour days in the month, they would be eligible for retirement. I think that I calculated these numbers on that person not working 8-hour days, so they would not be eligible for retirement. If they did schedule their hours such that they were eligible for retirement, that would be an increase to the numbers.
Yeah, we usually just spread it out, and that works out pretty well.
So this figure doesn't include what benefits we have to pay?
Yep, assuming it's not it does not qualify, assuming the person doesn't work a schedule that qualifies for retirement. If that's the case, there would be added cost to it.
Is it a benefit to limit them from the 15 to 19 hour week
Well, if it's
versus
19 hours or less, then there are no benefits. Of course, you pay FICA, have that. And you have a few comp. You don't have your health insurance and retirement, the two biggest drivers. 19 or less does certainly assist in the
Tim, would that be acceptable to look at something in the 15 to 19 hour range for the first year to give it a trial run?
Really would rather keep it at 25, because at that point, we're able to help people, you know, if they want to make phone calls, make appointments and different things, or if they have questions. I'd rather keep it at 25 if possible. I don't know how you'd even work out 19 hours.
That's less than 4 hours a day.
Yeah, that's not much. We're already way behind in our sales data entry right now, because we've been busy doing field work.
Well, that's just a good thing that we've actually got sales happening in the county,
Yeah,
so.
and the volume of sales has been picking up, definitely. In fact, it looks like for next year's study, based on the sales study that I do, the residential market is going to be pretty strong next year. Surprisingly, it's so in some townships.
And I don't want to,
Go ahead.
all right, I don't want to interfere with that possibility of more sales either, so I think it's needed, I really do.
Yeah, and,
Go ahead.
because you lost all help from the mapping part, right? They're 100% in the mapping now.
Yeah, IT is supposed to be doing it, but we haven't seen much progress from that. We've basically been asking for help from Dave most of the time, when he has time.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do we need to have a motion to,
Well, it depends. Are we going to listen to all the appeals and then decide? I think that's what we traditionally do. Or do you want to do it one at a time?
pleasure?
Personally, I think we should listen to them all.
And then see how we stack up with what's
Yeah.
left.
I don't
All
care,
right.
I don't care.
Alrighty, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
That's always kind of work.
All right, next on our agenda is Travis Alden with the budget appeal from Economic Development. Good morning.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning. You all know me, but I'm Travis Alden. I'm president of the Berry County Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Alliance. And with me today is Don Haney, our Economic Development Alliance Board Chair. And as you know, Michael Brown and Dave Jackson also sit on our board. So included in your packet is information pertaining to the appeal request for the EDA. But in the interest of time, I won't go over everything, but I did want to make just a few points here this morning. So first of all, I want to start by saying on behalf of myself, our team, and the Berry County EDA Board of Directors, I would like to sincerely thank the Commission for your support of economic development in our county. As I've said many times in the past, great communities don't happen by chance. Places where people and businesses want to be and can thrive are the direct result of focused, intentional, and collaborative action by organizations and people who care. And our organization strives each and every day to help increase prosperity throughout Berry County. This comes as no surprise, but in 2019, 2020, and beyond, the scope of what economic development is continues to expand. And with that, our scope of work by necessity also continues to expand. And in order to maintain that momentum, the modest increase that was proposed in the 2020 budget request is necessary. The traditional wheelhouse of economic development, chasing smokestacks and negotiating tax incentives, isn't what moves the needle anymore. As you know, we're focused on a slew of initiatives to specifically address our needs right here in Berry County, such as workforce and talent development, ranging from career exposure tours for hundreds of area high schoolers to specific talent attraction efforts like our Rethink West Michigan annual event, and of course, as you know, spearheading our successful flagship CAMA program. Leadership in the housing shortage discussion and partnering to bring projects to fruition. Innovative promotion of our communities to outside investment interests. Focused business retention and expansion efforts, such as bringing tariff-reducing programs from our regional foreign trade zone to local manufacturers. taking the lead on broadband expansion in our under and unserved areas, which, as you all know, we're seeing new momentum with multiple providers, which is awesome. Serving as capacity builders for multiple communities and business groups here in Berry County. Fostering positive relationships between community stakeholders and our state and federal elected officials through regular, targeted convenings, and the list goes on. And as I noted in the document in your packet, even though we go through the budget process like county departments do, what we have with the county is an annual agreement for economic development services with a contract dollar amount for those services. This allows us to utilize the efficiencies that we already have in place with our organizational model with the Berry County Chamber and leverage the private fundraising and fee-for-service revenue that we get to get the most bang for the buck for you guys. In closing, I urge you to partner with us to continue this forward trajectory. We're seeing significant economic investment in Berry County, and this is not the time to pull back. I respectfully request that the proposed budget of $133,891 be increased to the original requested amount of $140,585. So thank you for your time this morning, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Michael,
Yeah.
does that number include the 15,000 that we put in for career and technical training a couple of years back?
Yes, that would.
That's not a separate number, that's all inclusive in there.
We want to track, that would be on economic development, would be found on page
21.
121, fairly close to contingency, a couple lines down from contingency.
You haven't figured it out. Travis is the guy that's creating the problems for Tim, the Royal Coach project, the Moose project, the growth in Middleville. There's a whole lot of stuff that's been going on. And working with Travis, he's been able to focus the efforts and energy of business and private sectors, putting them together. And I think the discussion we just had last week was on how we could not get a developer to take a look at Berry County. And now we have floods of people coming in and looking at development projects in the area. So we've got a good economy, we've got a great leader in there. 7,000 is a reasonable request based on what we're doing. There's so many good things happening right now, all around the county, from blue zones to all the development processes that somewhat mind-boggling to see all the plates you're spinning to make all these different initiatives a reality here. So Michael and I have been a little more in tune with it being on that board, but it's been a pretty amazing adventure over the last 4 years to see how this has taken off and grown. Cam was just an example of what a great investment that's been, developing, supporting our manufacturers here as well. So
Appreciate that.
Did you just say that it's Travis's fault that Tim wanted more money?
yes.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Effect, I see.
He's doing a great job.
Any other questions for Travis? Dan?
I have a comment. Being on the broadband committee, which is very important to Berry County and the rural areas especially, they have been very supportive and did a lot of legwork for us on checking out and vetting companies for us and other things that way. And also, the fact that economic growth is happening causes people like broadband providers to want to check it out and come here. And I think that's a real big part of what our revenues are going to be in the future because of these type of things. And I think it's a small investment to make to keep it going and to keep it fruitful for our county.
Anything else?
Is the money that you're asking for just gonna be split out amongst different line items in your budget, or is it going to one thing specifically? Or are you going to increase CAMA the money that goes to CAMA?
No, it's not for one thing specifically. I guess to answer that question in kind of a general sense, on one hand, some of it will be, part of the reason for the ask for the increase is a little bit of uncertainty with Mike Schneiderhan's role. We've had the benefit of having two private foundations that have essentially underwritten the majority of his position since he came on board. Both of those funding streams are intended to be for a program startup, not long-term sustainability. So as we are pursuing other avenues for that, I do anticipate needing to potentially dip into our budget to offset some of that. So that's kind of part of it. But I would say the direction that I see us going in a that we kind of haven't done in the past is largely due to something that Dave was talking about, where it wasn't too long ago where I'm being kind of candid here, was lamenting at one of our Economic Development Alliance board meetings about the extreme difficulty in trying to get regional developers, Grand Rapids area, Kalamazoo area, that sort of thing, to understand the opportunities that exist here in Berry County. One of the specific examples that I used was I had set up basically a day-long familiarization tour with the head of business development for Rockford Construction. She was coming down from East Grand Rapids. She thought it was going to take over 2 hours to get here. And she told me that morning when she went to go get in her car and she put the GPS in for my office, it showed up as like 43 minutes or something. And she said that's basically the mindset of her whole team, is that Berry County is too far away for them to become interested. And so that really kind of got my gears turning in that we really need to kind of do a full court press to a certain extent to tell our story in a better way. And now we have somebody on staff, Alicia Blauvelt. I don't know if you've seen some of the video stuff that she's been able to do for us on social media. I think there's a lot of untapped potential there in terms of us being able to tell our story about Berry County and the opportunities here in a much more compelling way. So I think that's something that we'll be seeing a lot more of in 2020 that we haven't been able to do in the past. Long answer to a short question.
But that was a good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How much do you give to BCAN, the Berry Career Access Network?
Our contributions to BCAN are of the in-kind nature.
Anything else for Travis? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next is Paul Wing. You bet. Good morning.
We're from the Berry County Conservation Easement Board.
Yeah, you need to talk into that. Thanks.
That scares me. As you know, we requested $25,000 and we're awarded $10,000. The reason that we asked for 25 is because we have gone into contract with the Sheridan Land Services to help us preserve some farmland. The reason we're going at that right now is that the state has funded land preservation. The federal government will probably be involved, and we have an opportunity to preserve some farmland here in Berry County. And you may question whether we need to preserve farmland. My answer to that would be that it's pretty well been put out there that by the year 2050, the population in the world will be doubled. We have a lot of people we're going to have to feed in the future. And if you go on beyond that, if in 30 years the population is going to double, what's it going to do after that? You know, so we need to be willing, I think, to protect land one way or another. to be able to feed people in the future. All right, so our contract with Sheridan Land Services to get this round of development done is for $25,000. We've paid them $5,000 so far. This year, well, all right, with the nearly $5,000 that we still have left in our budget, it would take another $20,000 to get through the contract and get this round of preservation done.
I do have an email that Stacy sent. She regrets that she couldn't be here today. I'll read what she wrote. It says, here's a quick breakdown of what I feel are relevant expenses that the BCCE board should be raising in order to complete one conservation easement. $3,500 is an appraisal cost. Appraisals are good for 1 year. If the conservation easement does not close with 1 year, you must get an update. It is quite common for a conservation easement to take longer than 1 year to close. The cost of an update is approximately $750. I recommend requesting the first appraisal cost at $2,700 and an update cost, therefore $3,450 or $3,500. I also recommend requesting the landowner pay for the appraisal out of the proceeds from the closing and allocate the funds to the Community Foundation Endowment Fund to continue the effort to fundraising. The survey cost depends on the land, but this is a landowner expense. Closing costs, I would also encourage you to have a landowner pay half of the closing costs out of the proceeds and allocate those funds to the Community Foundation as well. Mailing and postage, $1,500. This would cover annual announcements of the application cycle and other mailings that may arise. And then program coordinator, she has budgeted $10,000. I encourage you to consider hiring a more permanent coordinator for the BCCE board, perhaps cost sharing with a current employee and adding this program to their job description. The total cost would be about $17,500 for 1 year. And then she has her contact information in case we have any other questions. So not knowing moving forward the number of parcels that may be submitted or may be approved, you still have to have the appraisals for each of them before they can be submitted to the state.
At this point, we have 23 applicants for preservation. Those are both farmland and open space. Probably because the $2 million that the state has will be over the whole state. There won't be very many of those that we have will be approved. So, but there's going to be cost. And
when you say approximately $3,500 per parcel, say, is a parcel one tax bill? So you could own 2 or 3 parcels, or is it just one?
It would be your, like if you have, contiguous parcels and you want to have them all done, it would be one appraisal, so it'd be one
Okay.
farm. And closing costs aren't cheap. There's a lot of paperwork that need to be done. You have titles, searches, and all that happy stuff and that's stuff that needs to be paid for.
If I might just add, in the appraisal area, we will not be doing an appraisal on a property that has not been selected and okayed by the state. So we're not going to have a lot of appraisals, and we won't do that until that's been approved by the state. So you mentioned a lot of applicants. We wouldn't expect that the state will approve. Very few, if any,
1 or 2, 3,
Yeah, which 1 or
5
2.
would be great.
The other comment I want to make to you is that with the approval of the new ordinance and so on, that has left us kind of at the starting gate. And had we known we would have had all those things done, last year would have been a great year for fundraising. But we will get on our fundraising hats, and we expect we're going to get grants from in the greater agricultural industry, and so we want you to know that we will have additional funding coming from other sources and grants from certain organizations.
And that is a lot of work down the road, but it's not for sure. We can't really count on that at this point.
This whole process statewide has been kind of backburnered, except for areas that have fundraising. And Kent County has some foundations that pay for conservation easements. Ingham County has a millage that pays for it, and so that's why they have over 6,000 acres preserved. So we're kind of behind in the conservation effort as far as ag properties go. But the state's cycle is a really great opportunity for us to get re-engaged in conserving agricultural properties and now open space. Any other questions? Dan?
This grant money that you're speaking of, Larry, were you able to start working on that at all now?
We've made contacts, and they have not, obviously, we have not asked them for given amounts. We've asked about their...
How to do it and all this stuff?
Right. And you know, I'm not wanting to say we're going to have a whole lot of dollars, but we know we will have some.
Okay. So this is basically this extra 15,000, well, plus your 5 that you have now. It's strictly for clerical work?
Well, and
Contract work.
Yeah, and some, the contract work that we're involved right now.
And the expenses that go along with that, like mailing and advertisement, and we sent out, I don't know, 2,500 cards to landowners. Packets that are going out to the 23 people are thick. They cost some to mail, you know, those expenses.
Okay.
Any other questions for Paul or Larry?
Michael, what's the budget been for when it was previously the farm preservation
You're asking
or ag promotion?
the contribution, the appropriation?
Yeah, what's it been in the past?
At the top of the page.
Top of the page. In 2019, it was 10,000, and 18, 5,900. 17, it was 2,950.
But, yeah, that was what we used, yeah. Was that?
That was what was budgeted.
That's what was contributed, that's what was budgeted, yes.
And what is Sheridan's actual role? That you say there's a contract with them. What are they doing? What's their process?
They know how to do this process. That's something that our board lacks, knowledge and time. It takes a lot of work to work with landowners to get through this process of the application thing was quite a lot.
And if I might say, they are going to be running this whole process for us. We really don't have the expertise to be doing processing those applications, what is required and what isn't and so on. They know how to do that because that's their business.
Legality, legal work.
So that when that application gets to the state level, it's been done right and will not be rejected and so on.
See this as something as kind of a tutoring or a mentoring? Or is this
Absolutely. The only problem we have with that, of course, is we don't have anybody here at the county level right now that could be setting in on those. And at some point, most of the counties will have a part-time person in a department somewhere that is able to step in and help out with that.
Some counties go through planning and zoning. Proper place to have this whole thing. Right now, we can't do that.
So is this, I guess when I see a mentoring, do you see a long-term process with Sheridan, or is this just kind of a startup cost?
He's recommending that we get someone local that would be a lot cheaper than she is.
She contracts through both Kent County and Ingham County to do all of the administration for their two programs. They both have considerable acres preserved. There's annual reporting that needs to be done. It's her and another staff member that have dedicated most of their time to the process in those two counties. I think for her to take on another county would be really stretching her limit, and that's why she encouraged us to find some local way to take care of that. I know planning has a staff member that's not full-time, but maybe the additional funds could be allocated to make that a full-time position and then do cross-training to make sure that they understand the paperwork. The one parcel that we have preserved has a folder about that thick or better for their state application and all their documentation that they've had to do for the last almost 10 years. So it's just not a small process, and they have to inspect the properties annually to make sure that they have not violated their agreement by, building a subdivision or something, adding buildings that weren't in their agreement. So there's some policing that has to be done on a preserved property.
Well, what has happened in the past with that property is we have done that for the state. And as long as we're mentioning that, one of the things that came up is I don't believe the county is keeping a record on that. And you probably should be keeping a copy of those annual reports that we send into the state, because that really is your easement that you're holding. And then one last thing, so you kind of understand the groundwork. These rounds don't happen every year. They don't even happen every couple of years. It might be 5 years before we do another round of people applying for it. So this is not like a every year situation. And those records are good for three years, I think. So if in 3 years we wanted to run another application, we can use those applications that they have already submitted this year. But I want you to understand it is not an annual thing. It might be 3 years, it might be 5 years. It's been a long time since we ran.
12.
Yeah, and what governs that is state and national money. That's what governs that.
Are you looking for this 25,000 budget amount for 2020 and beyond, or is this something you think if we do it in 2020, that maybe it goes back to 10 or 15 and 21 and 22? And then
Well, I don't know about 10, but I would certainly expect that we weren't going to have, if we get through this round, which will take all of next year, I wouldn't expect that we would have near that amount of clerical work. And that's why that whole issue of using the subcontractor to do that, those people that know how to do it, is probably a really efficient way to do it, if they'll do it.
And go back to your comment or when Heather was reading, so the appraisal fees, you're saying will be paid for up front by preservation, by the preservation board, but those monies will be coming back?
Yes, yes.
Part of them, probably, but not all of them.
So the landowners will reimburse?
Half the appraisal is what we're working on.
Okay. Same thing with
Closing
costs?
Closing
potentially?
cost would be theirs.
Recommended
That's
half.
Yeah.
And those funds go back into the ag or open space preservation, or they go into BCF?
You were mentioning.
Her recommendation was that the funds come back and go to like the Community Foundation Endowment Fund that the Ag Preservation Board has. I'm not sure how they could come back to the county unless I don't know how that would work.
So they kind of be donated back to them?
Okay, thank you.
So I know you read your email there, but so basically most of the increase is gonna be for Sheridan? Is that what?
Yes.
Well, the Sheridan wouldn't do the appraisal. You have to contract with a ag
Oh,
appraiser
yeah.
who's qualified to do a two-tier appraisal on the property. And there's not a lot of them, but there's a few, that specialize in ag appraisals. A lot of the other stuff, the closing costs on that parcel, I mean, that's a pretty average closing cost for any parcel when you change an easement like that, and that is gonna include your deed and all of your title search stuff. So,
We went into contract with Sheridan, and her total for the 2 or 3 years was $25,000. $20,000 that is due this next year.
well,
2020.
yeah, that was her à la carte menu, and it totaled 25,000. So we've already spent,
$5,000.
yeah, roughly.
But a $7,000 is due right now.
Yeah, she hasn't submitted a invoice yet.
Is this, Madam Chair, is this something that you can determine as you go? If you need more money to do it with, do you wait till the following year, or can we approve more money as we go? Because we're not for sure here what's gonna happen. There's 23,
Exactly.
and we don't know if we're figuring that just about all of them are gonna, half of them are gonna make it through.
Well, what will happen is those 23 people some of them may not be agriculture. The funding cycle from the state is only for agricultural properties. So say there's 10 that qualify as ag properties. They will fill out an application and the committee will score their application. There's a scoring criteria that was approved. And the highest one, or the best property that we have to offer out of the applicants, will be the one that we get ready to go to the state. And so Sheridan will help that landowner get the application together so that they look good to the state as well. And that may be the only parcel that we have the opportunity to have an easement on. But the other 10 may be open space, and they may want to just donate their property. There would still be closing costs for that we may be responsible for, or at least partly responsible for. It depends on the landowner. When George Colors donated his, there was no closing. The state took care of everything. They didn't have to go through a different lawyer.
Sure, there were expenses with that from the state, but.
But the state is,
But he did not request any funds at all, so there
Yep.
was no appraisal, and so there are ways, there's a lot of different ways of doing this. To say that it's gonna cost this much for all of those, not possible.
and we don't know when the next cycle will be from the state. We don't know how many people are going to want to donate easements on open space. There may even be people who say, I just want to get my land preserved and I don't care if the state funds it, I'm going to donate the whole easement. And that's pretty much what Mr. Colors did, was donated his whole easement without any benefit, financial benefit at all.
Or expense.
Or, yeah, because the state just did all of the paperwork. They have the qualified people to change, do the easement and stuff on his deed. And this could, I mean, we could have to make a part-time person just to handle this, or we might not have to do another conservation easement for 5 or 6 years, depending on when this cycle comes through. But
Hopefully it will be,
hopefully it's more regularly. I mean, they keep building more and more of these wind generation areas, and they take, X amount of acres out of each parcel to do that, and they have to pay the taxes on that. So that's how this fund has been built over the last few years. So,
Okay?
But what she's recommending, is that something that your board is going to be putting in as a criteria or process for these types of applications? Because I heard her say she recommends.
She recommends.
There were some from the
That we-
owners, some from.
Right, and that's how the other counties work, so that it's not just an expense for the landowner or an expense for the county. We are benefiting, we are having properties preserved, and we are the ones that hold the easement. And so with any land transaction, both parties should have some skin in the game on that.
But currently, you don't have that criteria set up, is it?
We don't have any type of hierarchy set up for this committee. This committee's been kind of mothballed for years, and not having a funding cycle, for 4 or 5 years, they were the promotion board, and they struggled to find, their voice there. They worked with a consultant to try to figure out which way to go, and then when this funding cycle was announced, it changed their whole purview. I think if there's not anyone interested in preserving property, they may be even able to suspend their meetings until someone is. I think it's kind of a moot point to have a meeting if no one's talking about preserving a parcel. And so, I mean, they have worked for how many years with no compensation, and they've met monthly or sometimes every other month and waiting for this day to come. And they have not spent a lot of money. I mean, some of their budgets are pretty simple, and that was more or less, they bought t-shirts and promoted agriculture and made a flyer, and they did the little things that they could do. Now they've got their job back, and there's interest in getting parcels preserved in the county. I don't know if it'll ever be a full-time position.
I think so.
Ottawa Counties doesn't have a full-time position. It's, they do it part-time, and several people in their planning and zoning handle the paperwork. But Sheridan Land Services is contracted to do the whole entire program for both Kent and Ingham. And so that's what they do on a daily basis. That's their 40-hour-a-week job, is land preservation in those two counties. They think Berry County is small enough, though, that we could get by with, about $10,000 to augment somebody else's paycheck and make them a little bit, instead of maybe a 3/4 employee, a full-time employee.
What does the board think about her recommendation to set this criteria? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Right.
Is what does the board feel?
Okay.
Do you think she's spot on or close, or do you agree with how she has this breakdown of so much by the landowner, so much by the board?
We have not had a meeting since this recommendation has come
Okay.
across.
All right.
So, but I think it's very good. I guess a little history. The whole committee was established in 2002. At that point, Extension was our administrative position. Dennis Pennington did our first farm that was preserved, and then he went on, so we didn't have anybody there. And we understood that if we had a position, it would probably cost $100,000, and that wasn't acceptable. So we've been going along with conservation. Big position. 2007 is when we preserved that land. Since then, we've been just carrying on, just trying to.
Waiting for this time. Go ahead.
Oh, that's all right.
But I was just going to say that this whole thing is contingent on whether there are going to be monies available from the Department of Ag nationally and the Department of Ag in Michigan. And so when those are available, that's kind of when it's time for us to do our work. And that's where we find ourselves. And fortunately, you all were kind of us to do the new ordinances. And so we're sort of like standing here at the starting line and ready to go with this.
Any other questions for Larry and Paul? Thank you, sirs. How about we take a little break? 5 minutes?